Christians do not believe in three gods. We believe in one God. So I'm going to give you a quick definition of the Trinity. The Trinity is a belief that God is one, only one God, and three in persons. In other words, one being or one what. There's one what. He's God. What I am is a human being. What God is a divine being, God. There's one what. But there are three persons, three whos. A being is that which makes you what you are. A person is that which makes you who you are. So what am I? I'm a human being. Who am I? I'm Nabil. Those are two separate things, what I am and who I am. In the same way, God is one what and three whos. It's not a contradiction. And so this is why when Muslims say 1 + 1 + 1 = 1, how does that work? It's like, no, those are apples and oranges. 1 + 1 + 1 are the persons, one being. And when Christians respond with, no, 1 × 1 × 1 = 1, that doesn't even make any sense. So don't do that. So the question that we now have to ask is, can God come into this world? I want to discover God together. I want to understand who he can be together. The first question I want to ask is, can God, if he so chooses, come into this world? Now, remember what we just talked about with Tawheed. There's a lot of disagreement throughout Islamic history and even today on Tawheed. Let's talk about the Old Testament version of this issue. Let's talk about what the Old Testament says, because that's what Christianity is built on, Judaism. So what does the Old Testament have to say? Can God come into the world? The answer is yes, many times over, yes. God comes in the garden with Adam. Jacob wrestles with God. God calls out from a bush. He shows up as a pillar of fire and cloud. God appears to the elders, Exodus says, and also God walks in front of Moses. There are many examples. These are just the first few books of the Old Testament and what I found in those. So can God come into this world? The answer is, Inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. God is able to do anything that he wants to do. Can that one God be complex? Now, we're going back to the issue of who God is. Even in Islam, he is very, very complex. We can't understand his nature. Now, within the Old Testament, is that so? The first time we see God introduced in the Old Testament is the very first verse of the Old Testament. The word God is Elohim. Okay, but notice, the word Elohim is plural. Technically, we translate this word gods. However, the verse treated that word as if it were singular. So it's plural and singular at the same time, from the very first verse of the Old Testament. There are actually 4 examples of this plural form God in Genesis chapter 1.